Hey, this is Rick Brandenburg for Turf Bugs and Rock and Roll, and a couple of weeks ago on this Facebook page, I posted a little bit about how far ahead we were in North Carolina, how at one point we'd been 24 days ahead this spring, and now we were about 16, 17 days ahead, and talked about degree days, and it generated some discussion about that and exactly what is a degree day, what does it mean relative to insects or to turf growth or to weed seed germination, those sorts of things. And I thought we'd spend some time over the next few weeks discussing that, not necessarily through videos, but through some posts and some information. And maybe I'll get my friend Fred Yelverton to talk a little bit about weed seed germination and how that all fits in. Well, a degree day basically is a way of measuring how warm it's been or lack of warmth, so that you can quantify it and you can compare one day to the next or 1 year to the next or whatever. And there are a lot of different thresholds for it. In the case of insects, we typically use a threshold of 50 degrees. In other words, what that says is no insect growth or development occurs when the temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. Now, that varies a little bit. Some insects, it might be 48, some it might be 51, but we just throw 50 out there because it's a good average. So when you want to figure degree days for a single day, you take the average temperature for the day and you subtract 50, the threshold. So if in the morning it was 60 degrees, it got up to 80 degrees, then you add those two together, it's 140, divided by 2, the average temperature for that day was 70 degrees. And if you subtract 50, the threshold, that gives you 20. It means you had 20 degree days for that day. That may not make a lot of sense, but it gives you a quantitative measure for the warmth that day. So obviously the warmer your average temperature, the more degree days you gain during that day once you subtract 50. Some degree day models use 32, some use a variety of temperature. Wherever the threshold is, with insects it's 50. So if you start on January 1 and you measure the average temperature for every single day and you subtract 50, if you get a value less than 50, or less than 0, excuse me, it's just a 0. But then as you get warmer and warmer in the spring, you start having average temperatures that are above 50 degrees. And when you subtract the 2, you get a positive value, like a 2 or a 6 or a 10 or maybe a 30 as we get into the summertime. And you just keep track of that, and that records the accumulation of growing degrees days. And we have growing degree days for corn, for soybeans, for cotton. We have it for insects. We have some for diseases. We have some for weed development. And it's just a way that we can say we're ahead of schedule compared to a 30-year average, or we're behind schedule. In this year, in North Carolina and much of the southeast U.S., we were way behind measuring degree days. In other words, a quantitative measure of how warm it's been for insects. We've been way ahead of schedule, and we still are ahead of schedule. So I'll go through with some calculations on the page here as we go through this week, some examples of articles talking about growing degree days, because it's really not a complicated thing. And some weather stations and things actually forecast this. There's a lot of websites you can go to that will actually show you this. But growing degree days, how many do you have each day, and how do those add up, and how does it compare to what the normal rate would be? Is it ahead or is it below? Hope that helps. We'll get Fred Yelverton to explain it all to you next week. See you soon.